Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this Saturday and this tremendous panel who are here to take a look back on what the past couple of years have informed us. And as we continue to navigate these moments that ask for reflection and action, offer a gathering that asks what it means to embrace revolution. I say gathering because we're not the only ones here. We are championed by those of you who have joined us and those that are no longer walking the earth, because we know that there's so much energy around us. And so we're just going to do what we do. We will shed whatever formality that may have been expected and simply come together with sharing and generosity. My name is Myekah Payette. I'm the artistic director of Tarragon, and I will co-moderate this discussion with my awesome colleague, Myekah Payne, associate artistic director.
Hi, everyone. So before we introduce our guests, it is critical for us to not only acknowledge that we are all part of a larger ecosystem within our community, Toronto, in which we live and operate, but that we also commit ourselves and in turn energize each other to continually reflect on and respond to our relationship to the land around us. This country has been cared for by generations of Indigenous, First Nations, Inuit, and Métis nations. The land on which Tarragon rests has been cherished and protected by the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat. We are mindful of the fact that the paths we still walk today to get to Tarragon from Davenport and DuPont are built on the portage trails first established and walked by these Indigenous peoples. We also honor and hold memory for those that were forcibly displaced onto this land and who cherish and embrace the communities who have welcomed us here in the spirit of allyship and restitution.
And of course, for those of our colleagues affected by the devastating news from Ukraine, we offer our solidarity and respect as this time unfolds. Please stay safe. We'd like to offer a few housekeeping pieces. So we will be recording tonight's conversation. If you need accessibility support, please turn on the live caption option below. We will welcome comments and questions in the Q&A tab throughout the discussion, but we'll make specific time towards the end to address them. We want to make sure that the dialogue keeps going in the chat function. So be kind, be respectful, and be open. And so in that chat function throughout, we encourage you to post some links and resources that you think spotlight what you're receiving from this conversation and highlights Black art. Because of course, we are all part of this work and this moment. For tonight, we will be welcoming our guests into a discussion that responds to where we are now and how Black voices and stories have been shared in our theater. Are we in revolutionary times? What can we collectively do to embrace change and inspire meaningful dialogue about historical injustice and trauma, alongside the chance to move forward and seek healing? As we near the end of Black Celebration Month, we are also taking this time to honor the lives that have been lost. In fact, 10 years ago to this day, our collective awareness of injustice of Black lives was cemented by the death of Trayvon Martin. It sparked a whole movement. Trayvon Benjamin Martin was fatally shot on February 26th. He was 17 years old and was studying in aerospace technologies at Baker Aviation School. He was a good student. He died at 7:30 p.m. 10 years ago. Please note that we will be taking a moment of silence wherever we are in the conversation to reflect on his time on Earth and the legacies of those who were lost before and after him and who are now in the arms of generations of ancestors who have paved our paths.
And with that, it is my pleasure to welcome our guests from the Toronto community who have equally been so impactful on a national scale towards their advocacy and the championing of the Black voice. So Syrus Marcus Ware is a Vanier Scholar, a visual artist, activist, curator, and educator. He is an assistant professor in the School of the Arts at McMaster University, Cyrus uses drawing, installation, and performance to explore social justice frameworks and Black activist culture. He is a core member of Black Lives Matter Toronto and is part of the executive team of the Wild Seed Center for Art and Activism. Hello, Cyrus.
Hello.
We have Luke Reece, who's an award-winning spoken word poet, theater producer, and playwright, and Soulpepper's associate artistic director. Through his work as an educator and artistic leader within the national arts community, he advocates for engaging and nuanced storytelling that challenges Canadian audiences. He's also one of Toronto's most decorated slam poets, becoming the Toronto Poetry Slam Grand Champion in 2017, winning the Canadian Festival of Spoken Word as the captain of the TPS team, and then again in 2018 as their coach. And that year, he placed second in Canada individually, which guarded him a spot in 2019 World Cup of Poetry Slam in Paris, France, where he placed fourth. In 2021, Luke was included in York University's inaugural Top 30 Changemakers Under 30 list. Welcome, Luke. Hey, Luke.
Hey, I didn't realize I gave you guys the long one. My goodness, I'm sorry, Mike.
I made it longer. It's okay. You're good.
And I am going to introduce Tanisha Tate. She is the artistic director of Cahoots Theatre. Tanisha is also a Toronto-based director, actor, playwright, music artist, theater and anti-racism educator, an accidental essayist, and former preschool teacher whose journey has included creative encounters with numerous performing arts organizations. Tanisha has been nominated and won numerous awards in all of these disciplines and is just an incredible human being. So hello, Tanisha.
Hi, everyone. Thank you.
And last but certainly not least is Makambe K, Simamba, who is a Dora award-winning playwright and actor for Our Fathers, Sons, Lovers, and Little Brothers. Her other plays include a Chingege story, the Drum Major Instinct trilogy, Makambe Speaks, and Mud. Select acting credits have been in those shows, as well as Invisible Giant, Bea, Winners and Losers, and Sia. She is the 2021 Urgel Coretta Artist in Residence at Tarragon, and she recently co-directed Invisible 2 at the University of Lethbridge and is a resident member of the artist-run theater company ARC. Makambe is proudly Zambian, and her intention is to be of service to her community through her ability to tell stories. Welcome, Makambe.
Hi, family.
Hey, little sis. And so folks, just like what a gift to have the five of you really part of this Saturday night. It is Saturday evening, and what a world we live in right now, yeah? And so my first question is, how are you? How you doing? Let's do a little check-in before we go in. Luke, how you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. Yeah, I ate dinner before joining our little Zoom beforehand, so I feel full. And I just feel really, I'm grounded, but I'm like grounded in my chest right now. So it's like a specific kind of grounded. That's how I am. Do I get to ask somebody how they're doing now? Can I pass it on?
Yeah, you can totally pass it on.
I'm gonna go to cousin Makambe. How are you doing? Good to see you.
Hey, cousin. Oh, my heart is happy seeing all of you. My body is figuring out how to be a person. Like there's just like a lot of energy in the world and a lot of things that I'm thinking about. So I'm present, but I'm also like in the world at the same time. But like very, 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 very ready to connect with everybody and have this conversation. I would like to pass the ball to Tanisha.
Hi, I am unsure. I wish I could say I was grounded. I do not feel grounded at all. Seeking ground. And exhausted, like really exhausted, and yet still trying to find and remember the things that I am exceedingly grateful for. So that's where I sit right now. Passing it to my dear beloved Cyrus.
Thank you so much. I'm doing so well today. I've been spending this week with a bunch of artists and systems thinkers who are imagining future worlds where we're all going to be so much freer. So feeling very heartful, very thankful, and the thought of getting to sort of close out this month that has been set aside to honor and celebrate our people, to be able to close it out with all of you is really beautiful. So feeling very thankful, Ashe. And I'll pass. Do I pass it?
You can totally pass it. I mean,
I'll pass it to you, Mike.
Oh my goodness, I will take that. I will take that opportunity. I think I want to borrow from all of what you've already said. I mean, yeah, I'm seeking groundedness, certainly. Exhaustion is part of it. I am finding moments of levity where I can, and this is absolutely one of them. I think personally, part of the pursuit of gathering together was ultimately, to springboard or to continue conversation, but selfishly to reconnect, I guess, in a way that perhaps I've been seeking, and didn't necessarily know that I needed. And so I'm all right. I am really, really thankful for this generous time and the generosity of you folks who are with us this Saturday evening. For you, Cyrus, Saturday afternoon. But yeah, that's where I am right now. I'm grateful for this. And so, Myekah, how you doing?
Oh, I would say that I mirror Tanisha's feeling of feeling a little ungrounded. I'm also feeling rather tired. I guess maybe I'm the one who's just going to say it. I am a little tired. The universe and the world right now is a little bit much. I have to turn off the news. I have to not look at my news feeds. I have to turn my phone on silent. I am having this moment where when we look at, I want to be hopeful. I want to be filled with hope all the time, about the way in which we hope the world will go. Because in the past 2 years, so much has come to light, only to turn around and see that people are still so war-minded in the world. And it's worrying. So I guess for me, I am both happy and grateful to be in a room full of beautiful human beings such as yourselves. So thank you for being here. But also, holy moly, is the world really it's a lot. It's a lot right now. So when we're talking about embracing revolution, I guess that's part of it, isn't it? It's not all sunshine and lollipops when we're looking at the revolution journey. I guess we're hitting that hard part of the mountain. And now I feel like I'm bringing it down. So I will ask like a really pleasant question, which I don't know what that pleasant question would be, except for, so to just like jump to, I guess, my question, which was that I was exhausted a little bit by Black History Month in the past years, because of all of the things that have been happening and because of so many people asking me questions about Blackness, or what does Blackness mean to me, or what does the history of Black culture in this country mean to me. And I wanted to ask, I guess, everybody in the room, how are you feeling? And I know that we all just kind of gave that feeling, the general feeling of how we're doing, but when we're talking about our culture in this space and time and in this moment, and when I use culture, I use it very loosely in terms of how we look at our Blackness for ourselves. How are you feeling in this, now that we're nearing the end of Black History Month or Black Celebration Month? How are you feeling in those kind of terms?
I'll start. I don't think I've ever been prouder to be Black in my life. I think that there is a tenacity and a ferociousness to us that is, I don't know if I want to say unparalleled, but it is incredibly unique. It's incredibly unique. At the same time, it's never felt heavier. And so that balance is really interesting, you know, that sense of being so proud and so affirmed in my sense of who I am and this, you know, race that I'm a part of, and everything that we have been through and stand for and continue to fight for. But then that feeling of the weight on your back all the time, and trying to live in hope that one day that weight will be completely gone, while at the same time not wondering how realistic that is, that hope, because the world is changing too slowly. So, yeah.
I want to just like, can I piggyback on that, Tanisha? Because I think that's part of like what is that balance there in terms of again, that recognition of that weight, that historical weight, and that and as it relates to, you know, the revolution is work, right? That knowing that, but at what point does that shift? Well, like, what does that shift look like? Is there an actual outcome, an end goal? What's the image of that world where that has been like, okay, weight has been lifted? Is that too euphoric? Is that too ideal? Like, what does that actually look like? I'm curious. Luke, what do you think?
Oh gosh. Oh gosh is my reaction. I feel like I don't know if it's too euphoric. I feel like in some places we need the levity, but I feel like in some places the heaviness helps. I think when I said that I was grounded in my chest, I think like what I actually feel is heaviness on my chest, but I'm allowing that to ground me by like just being aware of that and like sitting with it. I think one thing that I've learned over the last 6 months, for those of you who don't know, I ruptured my Achilles in August and have not been able to move physically in the ways that I want to. So I have been doing a lot of sitting, like a lot of sitting, like the most sitting I've ever done in my life. Actually, I guess when I was like a baby, I probably sat more, but you know, like it's been a minute since I've sat this much. And I felt the weight, and I think that weight and sitting with it has actually changed me in a way that is good. And it's been hard for sure. But I think I've liked that pressure that has shaped me in a new way. But you need to have support systems there in order to navigate that pressure as well. And I think that I have had those support systems the last little bit. And I think that maybe it's actually, when we look at what are we aiming towards? Maybe it is, how do we find those support systems so that we can navigate this together? What are those resources that are out there that we have as a community to lean on when we need to lean on someone else or something else in order to handle some of that pressure?
Mm-hmm. Cyrus, you are totally a spearheader of so many
community building.
So many, yeah, exactly. So much of, I think, what Luke is responding to in terms of, you know, in terms of that gathering of community and charging that, but also taking what I will translate as that heaviness, that heaviness, and mobilizing it. And so, do you think heaviness helps in this? In this, what do you think, Cyrus?
Well, I would have to say that, you know, I went to this this talk once on meditation and presence, and the facilitator said, if you could live for 60 years and not be living in the moment, not be present, but just be kind of living your life, doing your job, doing whatever, like, you know, how we can kind of be on autopilot. Or you could live for 60 seconds, but be fully aware of every one of those seconds and be fully present in your body. Which would you choose? And it was this question for us. And I think I would rather live 60 seconds where I was really in my body, where I was really in my community, where I was really present. And so to me, talking about reality, we can call it heaviness, we can call it whatever we want to call it, but talking about the reality of the system that we find ourselves in is how we are going to change it. So we need to be in a moment where we can talk about feeling like garbage, that we're overbooked and underpaid in February again. How did we end up here again? Exhausted, keeping ourselves over the finish line in the shortest month of the year. How are we here again? So we get to feel that. We get to talk about white supremacy. We get to talk about all of these things that are really happening. And in doing that, it allows us to transform our conditions. It allows us to be together. It allows us to say, well, what do we want to do differently? What is going to be different February 2023 so that we're not, you know, like, and we get to actually start to dream into a future. But the only way that we do that is by being in presence and being in reality. And so I'm not interested anymore in just smiling it all away. Like, I feel like, you know, we've done that, and I'm a joyful person. I'm a hopeful person. I'm fundamentally so hopeful. I really do believe that we are going to make it. But we have to be able to be real with each other, with our communities, with our society. And in doing so, you know, be catalysts for changing the conditions so that the heaviness actually starts to dissipate, the change starts to manifest, and the world starts to look very, very different. So that's what I'm invested in.
That's brilliant. Brilliant. Cyrus, and so like Makambe, within that, I want to give you some space as well. Like, when we think about what it means to embrace the revolution, right? And that opportunity to embrace those 60 seconds, right? But while looking towards the future, how does that resonate for you at this moment in time?
I'm thinking a lot lately about like how to just like live my best life and like how to be a bit more selfish and how to like tap into my joy and celebration because I deserve to. Hello. Yes. And also we did not come here to just be some struggling because the thing is, right, all of those really humbling reminders of what it means to walk through the world in the Black body. There are some days where like that heaviness, like there are days and moments where that'll be inescapable. And I just know that that's a thing. And I just know that's a part of my life, my family's life, your family's life. So for me, I'm like, okay. Today, the world did not give me as many reasons to hate myself as usual. I'm gonna do a face mask. Like, I'm gonna get this champagne that I can't afford. Like I'm really curious about investigating what happens when I sort of allow myself to like feel that joy, because what I know for sure is that it does always balance out. So that's kind of my biggest the biggest thing on my mind right now. And also like when I'm working on Our Fathers, Sons, Lovers, and Little Brothers, it's like this, like in so many ways, it's such a sad and devastating show, and something that I really appreciate Donna Michelle St. Bernard for is that like we're always keeping a sense of like humor in not just our own relationship, but with the work, even though we're talking about a lot of heavy things all of the time. And so I'm just continuing to investigate and see fruits of like what the value is of like trying to lean into the joy on purpose. And if it's a day that you can't, it's okay. Take the L like a champ. The world is really frustrating. In regards to like thinking about February is so important to me. Not only is it the month of the cousins, Black History Month, Black Excellence Month, Black Thriving Month, but I sort of like I like changing the language about Black History Month, because I feel like history has this energy, history, and there's something about celebration, like I'm just thinking about what it's like to like, what if this is the month where like we get to be the selfishest and we get to love on each other the most and like celebrate and like teach people the least. Like that's sort of been my energy this month. And I found it a lot more energizing than feeling like I have to like show up to educate white people. There are books in the world. I don't want to be the book. And so, yeah, rearranging some of that energy has been really an interesting investigation. February is not only Trayvon's birthday and Trayvon's death anniversary. It's also my little brother's birthday that inspired the play. It's also my birthday on the 28th. So February is the year actually that I set intentions for my life and my artistic practice on the 28th, because I can't do it on January 1st because I'm not organized. So I like to sort of take stock of things this time of the year where things have sort of settled down. Yeah.
I mean, you all make me feel much better about this month. That I'll put that forward. Like,
I think it's valid to feel that exhaustion. That's valid. I get that as well.
And I see that like it was a time, I don't know if you ever, it's like February being associated with Black Employment Month, right? And it's like this being the time where, you know, where all of a sudden it's like, okay, let's either fill those positions, let's make those contacts, and then come by, you know, and then in the shortest month. But, you know, if there's a leap year, then it's like you get that extra day, you know? But but I hear like a couple of things with that. And Tanisha, there's something that Makambe said that I want to address, about, especially about the education factor, because we were on this panel
Wednesday.
Like Wednesday with Tapa, right? And it was, if I may, just offline, we were talking about just like the information, like not wanting to be the go-to person, but were some folks not wanting to be the go-to person, but there's also some rumblings of like, well, we also want to steer the direction in which information is relayed, right? And so there's like that balance of wanting to control that messaging versus not wanting to be responsible for it, you know? And I wonder if you could just speak a little bit about that fact, or that dichotomy, if you will.
Yeah, I think that Black people are exhausted of, you know, always being turned to be the Britannica and World Book on race and racism. First of all, there's an assumption that because you're pigmented that you know everything about the history of Black people, which is not necessarily true at all. But I'm very concerned about telling people simply to like Google or read without any more discernment than that, because there is so.
Thank you, Tanisha. I want us to hold that thought. I'm just clocking this particular time as it is, folks. It is 7:30, and so we will be taking a moment to acknowledge Trayvon's death as well as lives lost. We will be taking a moment. Thanks, ma'am. Tanisha, thank you. Just to bridge that thought back into our consciousness that you were mentioning Google in that thought.
Yeah, what I was saying was that I think we have to be really careful about just sending people to like the internet to get their information about the history of race, relations, racism, Blackness, because there is so much misinformation out there. And when people who are ignorant of the truth and are seeking the truth come online, that ignorance is going to preclude them often from knowing what is a verifiable source and what is not. So it's very easy to take deep dives into nonsense and then walk away from that as truth. So I'm always someone who, if I have the energy and if I believe the person is coming from a real place of humility and desire to learn, and I can give them information that I know is correct, then I will. I won't always have the energy to do that, but I remember it's so vivid for me being on in a Facebook thread one day, and a conversation came up about reverse racism, the notion of reverse racism. And there was a white woman who genuinely wanted to understand, because she'd been in situations where she had been racially discriminated against by people who were not white. And she said, why is it not a thing? And there were a lot of Black people in the thread who were justifiably tired and didn't want to deal with her. And they were like, woman, go read. And it was like a real barrage. And in my head, I was like, this woman is not going to get off this call and go read. This woman is going to get off this call feeling so berated, and that's going to be it. And so I said to her, you know, I'll try to explain a little bit if you're willing to listen. And she's like, yes, please. And I went and I explained to her my explanation of why reverse racism is not a thing the way that she thinks it's a thing. And at the end of it, she was incredibly thankful. And she said, I'd never seen it from that perspective. Thank you so much for taking the time. And I thought that went better than if she had just gotten off that call and went to Google and looked up reverse racism, because likely all she would have found was a bunch of tweets of like angry white people claiming to be victims of reverse racism. She wouldn't have gotten any actual information. And so I understand the fatigue. I have felt it. I feel it every day. But where I can help to be a source of truth and light and information, I try to be as much as I can.
Cyrus, I saw you nodding your head before. Did you want to add anything to what Tanisha was saying?
Oh, I just, it's so, I love getting to listen to Tanisha talk, because you have a generosity of spirit that is so genuine, and so what I think we often see is a particular kind of activism that is maybe in the streets running, with a picket sign or whatever, but there's this other work that is more relational, that is so much more difficult in some ways to do. And I know that I can't always do it because I'm tired. I'm so tired. I probably would have been one of the people who was like, oh my gosh, go look it up. But we need people who are going to be able to just have that generosity. So I just was nodding because I was like, yes, I mean, this is where change starts to happen on an individual level, which is really profound.
Well, you're incredibly, incredibly generous too, Cyrus. And I have to say, we need both kinds of people, because I don't have the energy that you have to be at every march. Like, I don't have that, and so the activism has so many different facets, and we need people who are stepping up for all of it. And so I'm really grateful that we have people of all different persuasions and personality types who gravitate towards a certain facet of it, because every single one of those people is necessary.
Mm-hmm. And I think so much about systems change and about how we're going to, if we actually so we just, 21 Black futures, we're going to make this world where we're going to be freer, but how do we actually get there? And I don't you know, I don't think that a significant portion of the human population is just going to disappear from the earth. So we're going to have to figure out some way to be in relation with each other. And I mean, just for anyone watching, we are not saying as Black people that we're going to continue to do all of this unpaid labor, but we are definitely saying, please educate yourself, please do the work, please, please, please do the work. But also we're going to, you know, there's going to be a point where we're going to need to figure out ways to meet each other. And I'm just thinking so much about that right now.
And I think actually, Cyrus, that's a good reminder for those listening and who may have came a little bit late, is that we also, you know, we're calling on you to offer some resources, some links within the chat itself to share, exchange, cross-educate, all of that, self-educate, whatever you think is meaningful that is sparking from this talk. Also, if there are like artists you think that other folks would should know about, please do, you know, in terms of that celebration of Black voices and Black art. And I want to go into like the six of us really, but we'll talk about the four of you specifically. I mean, you're all multifaceted, but certainly one of your vehicles has been through artistic exchange, right? And your various roles in leadership, right? Whether it be the leadership of stories, leadership through activism, leadership to your companies, or just again, generally in your own work. And so Tanisha, I'm going to keep on you for a little bit, but this is a question for everyone. And it's about representation, all right? And leadership. And so I think one of the, this is like a terrible segue, but I'll offer it anyway, is that one of the biggest like gifts, I think, not gifts, but wins, I guess, in the past year and a bit was like Band-Aids. Remember, like when all of a sudden there's like, we're no longer getting into the conversation.
Super excited about Band-Aids. I'm sorry, I went out and bought 3 boxes.
I bought a whole bunch of boxes.
With the color of my hand.
It was a big thing. You know what I mean? Or like the crayon box where you're no longer, you know, in kindergarten being like, can you pass this? Or like some kid being, can you pass the skin color? And you're like, and you're literally having a meltdown at 6 years old.
What a voice, how
or like an existential crisis. Anyway, that aside.
Very exciting.
Band-Aids.
Also, I wanted to throw, okay, I'm sorry to cut you off, Mike, but the other thing that I really, really enjoyed was that I went to my Shoppers Drug Mart in Brantford, Ontario, and I could find palettes for my skin tone on every makeup aisle. And that was very exciting for me because my small town did not have any of those things when I was growing up. Not a single thing that was in my skin tone or coloring or anything. We had to go out of town. So super excited for me. So I just gonna share my excitement because I can buy makeup.
Yes, I'm sure there's another side of that is probably pretty corporate resounding that we probably don't have. That's like a whole other conversation market-wise, but nevertheless, we know that it matters. What's that?
Ballet shoes and tights as well. By the way, for performers, I'm just saying, ballet shoes, tights, super exciting. When I was in school, I had to go and buy like 3 pairs of gray colored tights to make them look like my legs, and people were still like, that don't look like your legs. And I don't know where you find flesh tone. I don't have flesh tone. Doesn't matter. Sorry, I'm going.
no, it's good. It's good. I mean, that took a long time though, right? Anyway, we buy stuff too, just saying. But anyway, when it comes to leadership and the stories that we know we can, I think we can see a noticeable difference within our sector, or it's like starting to make noticeable differences in terms of what stories are being presented, but not just the stories themselves, it's the leaders of the stories, you know, when it comes to directors, creators, predominantly, and of course, leadership of institutions. So Tanisha, wondering what are some of the shifts that you're seeing within the sector? And are we, when it comes to leadership specifically, when doors are opening, conversations are opening up, and representation is shifting, do we see that as meaningful? Really? From your perspective, do we see that as meaningful? Or is it more of this like, okay, checkbox situation for a company, for an institution that is responding to the world? Is it, I guess the question is like, what's the level of authenticity you're seeing with the shifts?
I think it varies. I think it depends on who's behind the shifts and what they actually want. I think that there are companies in which there may be people working there or people on the board who are legitimately in a self-reflective place and are looking at the world and are thinking like, our company is not, we're not doing it. We're not stepping up. We're not being who we need to be. And so they're making decisions to try and rectify years of a mess. And then I think there are other companies that are opportunistic, that know that they need diversity for funding, that know that they look bad as being the company that's still all white and they don't want to look bad. And there's no real moral compunction behind their decision. So it's both. But I do think that, you know, for the companies that are making the moves from a genuine place, that's a really good thing, but that's not enough. Doing that from a genuine place is great, but what are you doing in order to make that in any way feasible or successful, right? Like the ones who are doing it from a non-genuine place, they are the checkboxers. They're like, Black person, right? And then they're going to wait for a few months and look for an Indigenous person, and then they're going to look for an Asian person, then they're going to look for someone in a wheelchair, then they're going to look, then they're going to look for the trans person. Like, they're just going to check off all these boxes and make themselves feel really good about themselves, but for no reason really. But the ones who are genuine, once you decide that you want to hire the people, there are steps that you need to take before you actually do that. Right? You have to stop after you realize we need to hire some Black people. And then you need to evaluate your organization, look at the way things operate, and ask yourself sincerely, is this an environment in which a Black person is going to be psychologically safe and capable of making any actual change? Mm-hmm. Right? And if it's not, if it's a deeply, deeply all white everything, everybody that works there only wants to work a certain way, people are not on board, and there's no reason to believe that there's going to be any real change in that space, then putting in a Black person is putting in that person to fail. And then to afterwards say, see, we tried, we put in a Black person and it didn't work. And then we don't get another shot, right? So it has to be about readying the waters before you ask someone to swim in them. And we don't do that enough. We just say, oh, we need a Black person. Then suddenly we hire one. And then that person is in this incredibly, you know, racially backward setting where people of color have literally never even been thought of before they hired this person. And now they're supposed to thrive. It's ridiculous.
Mm. Luke, do you have any thoughts on that? Because, you know, in your role as Associate AD and when you Myekah and in Soulpepper, I mean, you're not, you know, from your vantage point, what are you hearing from Tanisha?
I have to acknowledge the question in the Q&A too in relation to this question, because I think that they're definitely tied together.
I think that's fair. Yeah, do it.
Just because I saw it pop in there twice. It sometimes feels like Canadian theater communities don't want to change. How do we battle hopelessness? Yeah, sometimes I feel hopeless, to be honest. Not most days, but there are times. And it's because in order to do everything that Tanisha just laid out in terms of like the time it takes to get organizations ready, like it also means like collectively we need to just like chill out for a second. Like I think that the culture, the work culture in theater, speaking from my experience, is not set up in a way where we can actually do that. Like it's not. We work ourselves to the bone, and we also feel like we always have to be putting out work, even when the entire world shut down. My biggest hope for the community was that people were just gonna like stop, like I don't know, and think. and not feel the need to pump out work. And then everyone was like, we'll just do everything online. It has to happen. We'll just do it online. And I was like, really though? Like, I'm tired. I've been tired. Like, we just finished Carolina Change. I was like, that was huge. Can we just, like, this is actually not kind of nice. If I could just like, and I honestly think that, like, I look at some companies, and like including looking at Soulpepper, which I joined like halfway through halfway through, as if it's over. You know what I mean? I joined it a year into the pandemic. That's how I should word it. And I still look back and I'm like, wow, what a missed opportunity. Like, honestly, like, that's how I feel about the time that we had. Like, we're actually in a position where we could stop operations or at a certain level, and people would understand that we were doing that. Like, nobody was actually sitting there calling us up being like, I want more Zoom this, I want more. Like, we could actually have more time collectively to look at our practices, to look at the relationships that we've made, to look at these organizations, and to set new standards, new expectations, new goals for coming up. Because what I'm seeing already as we begin to open up is some of the same stuff. And I'm like, how are we actually supposed to be successful like this? I can't do that. So I think that's so the answer to the question of how do we fight hopelessness, I think, like, we need to collectively come together as an industry and, like, give ourselves permission to slow down and to prioritize those things that we keep talking about. We say that these things are important to us, but then when you look at the way the budgets are structured, you look at the way that the seasons are structured, and how many resources and human resources that you have, and how we're pushing those human resources to the limit to try to, like, get some kind of a surplus or what it might be at the end. I'm just like, I don't think this is aligning, to be honest. I'll stop there for now. I'm sure this will come back around again.
Brought up a few things there, Makambe. I'm curious what you think there, but it's like it's the position imitating life and vice versa. It's like on one hand, yes, the seeking permission, I suppose, seeking permission to take space, not to take space, yeah, to take space. But I mean take space for this stuff, or take space for whatever internal investigation from a company level or institution level. But that challenge, because it's a real challenge, because there's still this, like, going back to, like, what is during this time, let's use the various realizations of not just the pandemic itself, but there is a responsibility towards in leadership from an artistic standpoint, that our relationship is to community, is towards the dissemination of work and stories, right? Or theater. And so to take that moment to pause while still addressing the need for institutional offering is a challenging thing to negotiate, right? Makambe, like, like when you see that time, it's like, because I love what you said before, it's like, what I will translate to be like, okay, the champagne thing. I'm like, yeah, being kind of like just taking that moment, the champagne moment. Can we just call it the champagne moment? It's like having the champagne moment, right? But you're like, oh snap, like, I still got to do something. And so how do you negotiate that? Or do you actually go like, no, I actually don't have to do anything right now?
That's such a good, beautiful, juicy, colorful, hard question. My theater practice is like, my personal theater practice is inherently diverse in that I don't just act, I write. So I'm always working for myself in some shape or form. And I'm continuously investigating and figuring out how that can look nourishing to me. And sometimes some granting body is giving me some money to pay my bills. And other times that's not the case. But my question is like, what's nourishing? like, where is your nourishment? And is it coming from your theater practice? Like, and if it's not, why is that? Like, what are the things that your practice needs to gain or lose? Or your experience of working within organizations, like what needs to change in order for those experiences to be nourishing? And then, like, once we figure out and can give that language, I feel like we can ask for that. And I think that's like there's a lot of I acknowledge there's a lot of examples of artists being like, we need this, and then like organizations or people in power being like, no, nicely, but like not meeting needs. But I do think that there's something in terms of being able to actually really continue to investigate and know and articulate like where your joy is and where that spark is. It's hard in theater. Luke, you brought up such a beautiful point, cousin. It's just like we work ourselves to the bone. Like being a successful theater artist, you don't strip. There's no stripping involved, and nobody told me. And like, you're kind of not really that rich. Like, what is the, like, there's this kind of like, I definitely do feel the pressure to keep going, and I'm not sure if I can like fully stop, but I don't know how to sort of balance that need. One is practical, and it's like I need groceries, and this is the thing I went to school for. So I'm like, sometimes I do have this there are a lot of things that I've been able to achieve in my career because I've like been like, I'm gonna get this. I don't care if you like it. I am doing this show, or I'm saying this thing, or I'm showing up to this space, or I'm auditioning to this thing. So it's like I've had to really start thinking about like, A, is that the energy that I want to exist in for the rest of my life? B, that energy has gotten me a lot of the things that I've wanted. But C, like, it's also really exhausting to feel like I've had to be like, I know nobody looks like me in this program, but I'm still going to try to get the lead in the show. Or like, I know that like I'm not being represented in this organization, but I'm still going to apply for the job. And I will stand up at this discussion, and I will say this is the thing that we need. It's tricky in practice. I acknowledge that. But I do think that there's mileage in talking about it. I do think that there's mileage in being able to acknowledge, like for me, it means a lot for me to see artistic leaders like acknowledge and name like we're tired, like acknowledge exhaustion. I'm like, oh my gosh, thank you. I didn't know that. I thought that I could like only tell my mom. Like I didn't know that I could actually exist authentically with my colleagues. And I think there's a reason that our industry is, there are reasons why that's the culture that we're in. So I definitely value and appreciate the invitation to pause. But I also admit that I'm still figuring out how to do that and what that would look like, and sort of sometimes battling a fear of like the internal voice is like, Makambe, you've worked hard, and you were you were yelling at those people, and you were doing this, and you were hustling, and it's just like, don't lose the momentum, because like, what if it never comes back? That's the thing that I have clocked for myself. Like, I'm curious, like within the group, does anyone else ever feel that pressure to just like keep going, or keep on the hamster wheel at the thought of, oh my gosh, if I stop or take a break, like all the things that I've worked for will never come back, and then everything my immigrant parents did will be a waste, and I'll be disappointing all people who look like me, and I'll never have joy again.
Every day. All the time, every day.
Yes. Yep. Yes.
I wake up that way. I go to bed that way.
I had this realization today. I was asked to bring in, we were doing a circle, and I was asked to bring in something from the landscape. And I wanted to bring, there was a fire that was burning outside, and I wanted to bring the fire, but you can't, because it's fire. So I like looked around, and I found a little piece of wood that was burnt, and I brought it in, and I was sitting there, and they asked us to sort of reflect on it. And I realized, right, Cyrus, you can't touch fire. Like, I actually am in a place in my life right now where I need to hold on to the wood that's already cooled down. Because, I actually need to believe that someone else is going to keep the fire going. Like, I have to believe that. And what does it mean to let yourself believe that someone else is going to keep the fire going? Like, I mean, and not in a narcissistic way, like, oh, I'm the only one who can keep the fire going. I don't mean it like that, but I just mean we have a pressure to be like, you know, we've opened this door and we got to keep it open, and we got to make sure that our siblings can come through the door too. And we got to, you know, we're change makers. We're doing all of these things to undo systems of anti-Blackness that are, you know, generations deep, right? And the worry I've always had is that if you stop, I think it's exactly what you're saying, right? Is that, you know, that it's all, the fire is going to go out, right? But we are the fire. Like, our community is a fire that is going to continue to burn. So some of us can go and pick up the wood that's cool enough to touch. You know, in a forest fire, how it actually activates all the seeds and allows new growth to happen, right? But you can only get to that point once the fire's cooled off. So anyways, I'm just thinking about fire. I'm resonating. I'm saying, yes, I've definitely felt that. And right now I'm trying to sit with this idea that, one, the fire, you know, is going to continue to burn forever. Two, I can start to touch the wood that's cooled off a little bit because I've spent a lot of time in the fire. And three, you know, just this idea that I guess the future is possible. I don't know.
That was the most amazing thing.
I wanted to cry. I actually, like, what did you can't touch the fire. You can't touch, right? You can't touch fire. I love that. And I'm stealing that. Can I steal that? Can I borrow? Sorry, I'll borrow it. I'll give it back.
Only with citation.
We're all sharing.
Only citation. Like, isn't that, like, Tanisha, isn't that so, like, just hold on to the cool. Like if you have that opportunity, because the community is fire. We are fire.
No, I get it. I mean, you know, in my activism, more kind of out there activism days, I was never an anti-racism activist the way that Cyrus is, like, on the front lines, but I was an anti-violence against women activist for many, many years. And it was the same just feeling of, you get to a point where you're like, I can't, it's too hot. Like, it's too hot and I need to just withdraw. And withdrawing isn't a failure. Withdrawing isn't saying that I'm abandoning the movement. Withdrawing isn't saying that I don't care anymore. Withdrawing is self-care so that I can renew and reassess and maybe come back. And withdrawing is also giving someone else a chance to step forward and giving someone else a chance to maybe lead in the more kind of, you know, upfront way. And that's a really good thing. But the fear of fading out, I think I had it more when I was younger. I think you have to get to a point where if you believe that you are doing good work and that you've made an impact, that's not going to vanish because people don't see you for 6 months. I think I've gotten rid of that fear a little bit. Mike, how would you feel if because I just love this question that Marilo asked in the chat.
Yeah, please. Yeah, I love that. And I have to, just for our listeners, like, we have gotten, so Myekah and I, we had like this list, and the way this convo is going, I love, like, it's what's happening, folks. So Tanisha, yeah, please go for it. So
Marilo, thank you so much for this question about, do you think the revolution that is happening, that would have happened without a global pandemic? And then you say, I put revolution in quotes because this is not really a revolution because things still have so far to go, and what needs to happen to take hold and really create lasting change. Do I think it would have happened without the pandemic? No. My answer is no. Maybe at some point, but certainly not now. You know, I think that there was a confluence of a few things that made this beginnings of a revolution, hopefully, we'll see, happen. One is the fact that the pandemic literally slowed down our lives, and for many of us brought our lives to a halt. And so we were not as busy, we were not running around, we weren't on the subway, we weren't doing 9,000 things a day. A lot of us were sitting at home, working from home, on the internet, more able to keep in touch with what was going on in the world. And that allowed us to take in the horrors that were happening in a very different way from if we were frenetically busy, right? Because before George Floyd, I mean, how many people had died? How many men had been killed? And, you know, people were like, oh, that's so terrible. I feel so awful. And then we go back to work and, you know, not much changed. But I think the fact that the world was at a standstill really allowed that to hit people in a more resonant way. The second thing I think was actually the way that that man was killed. We are in a society now where we are so used to guns and shooting. Like, we are so used to guns and shooting. We are always seeing people being shot. We take in, you know, gunshots all the time on TV, video games. Like, we're so used to shooting, and the US especially has a mass shooting or more every single day. So as much as we're horrified by shooting, a lot of people have become to a certain degree desensitized to it. It was very different to watch someone die over 9 minutes. Like, I'm gonna cry, you know, like having his neck crushed. And I think that plus the fact that we were just in a place of stillness made a very profound impact on people. Now, whether that means that 2 years from now, we're still going to be doing good work, I don't know. But I think that the impetus for a lot of what happened was the coming together of those two things, and people just not being able to turn away and not being able to deny just the horror of it all. And so that led to people wanting to do things. Now, I think some of what they've been wanting to do has been great, and some of what they've been wanting to do has been silly. And Mike, we were on a call, I think the Supamo call a couple of months ago, where I talked about, you know, the way to deal with George Floyd's murder is not to like randomly hire a Black marketing person. Like, you have to actually think about, what am I doing consciously to really try and help a group of people forward, and not do these knee-jerk random things that actually don't have any real resonance. And I will stop there.
Cyrus, yeah, please.
Sorry, I just have to say, I actually think we are in a revolution. I actually feel like we are, because I believe that revolution is not a one-time event, but a process that takes place over a period of time. And when you study, like I study systems change a lot, right? And I teach systems change and systems thinking, and you can watch systems go through life cycles over and over and over again. And they go through periods of growth and expansion, but they also go through periods of rapid change, collapse and reorganization. And we're in a moment of collapse and reorganization. And I think that what we saw in what I would call, I guess, the uprisings of 2020 was the beginning of a revolutionary moment that actually had been churning under the waters probably for 50 years, you know, because since the civil rights movement, and maybe if you were to articulate this revolutionary moment now as being an abolitionist one, then since the first attempt to abolish slavery, which was only negatively abolished. So we're in this revolutionary moment that is right now frantic, fast, because we're in the moment of collapse in that systems change loop that happens over and over again. And so it feels fast, but it's actually been growing and brewing for a while and will continue. You know, that Charlie Mingus song about the fight song of the Haitian Revolution, where at the end of the song, you know, the notes trail out it's not like it just stops. It also peters out on the other end of the spectrum too. So I'm actually very excited about being in a moment right now that is a revolutionary one because of the potential for change making that happened. And I think that I just want to say, you know, I too, when Luke, you were saying we could have just stopped. Like, this moment of this pandemic, actually, you know, a lot of people who had economic justice or privilege, you know, did stop it initially. And a lot of people got politicized that were not politicized before. And I was watching people using Zoom to do teach-ins on abolition, on policing, on anti-Blackness, on dismantling white supremacy. People were writing think pieces about white supremacy in the arts. People were doing all of this politicized work from home in the early parts before the killing of George Floyd, and then Regis Gorczynski Payette, and then Defonte Miller, all of these other cases that came up. But anyways, I really think that we're still in it. We're still in a revolutionary moment, and I think that the fires that are burning right now are going to continue to burn as we push forward towards change. And I think that what needs to happen for this revolution to really take hold, well, I think it actually already. I mean, we're in it. We have to believe that the change that is happening right now is going to manifest, that we can actually believe and lean together into a future. So anyways, I mean, this is just the beginning of the Charlie Mingus song. I mean, the notes are only just starting to get louder. We haven't even reached the cacophony. And that's the moment when people see revolution. They see the sparks, like the most dramatic moment is what we think of as this tiny moment of revolution, but it's actually this big, long song.
I actually used the word cacophony today, talking about everything that we're living through right now. And I just want to quickly say, Cyrus, that I think that a lot of what we're seeing on the other side is a response, is a fear-based response to the potential power of this moment, right? The crazy uprising of, I mean, again, there has always been the undercurrent of fascism. All of that has always been there, but the way that it is coming forth now in this very unabashed way, in the way that there were people that would only kind of talk about the horrors that they were as human beings in basements, and now they're happy to do it on Twitter and everywhere else. I think that is in many ways a response to the fear of an uprising. As well as the response to the kind of, I don't want to get too Trumpian, but what happened during that 4-year period where there was just a real kind of dismantling of shame, where, people at least used to understand, oh, if I'm a horrible racist, I'm going to try and be one underground, and that was gone. And now I'm going to be like a proud white supremacist, and that is a real shift, and that is to, I think, in part to let those who are on fire on our side kind of know that they're there and that they are responding to our fire with their own.
Do you, Luke, and I wonder within I want to talk about fear, because I personally, I've been negotiating revolution. And I hear what you're saying, Cyrus, and I'm on that bandwagon. I'm totally on that bandwagon. But there's also this on the other side, the relationship to fear, right? Within that. And so I'm curious, Luke, from your perspective, is this, when we're saying embracing revolution, for instance, is that also embracing an outward fear? And then how do you use that? And I'm going to use the word use that to inspire growth and natural evolution, or allowing that, just to use that analogy, allowing those notes to trip along.
These are good questions.
It's a good conversation.
Fear. I don't even know where to start. I wrote, I'm afraid of dying. Like, I'm really afraid of dying. I don't know if that's a strange thing or a redundant thing to say, but like, I don't have like a fear of heights, but when I am like up high and I feel like my life is in danger, then I have a fear of heights. I do not want my life to end. And I I don't let that fear drive me because I don't want to be paralyzed. Because the reason why I don't want my life to end is because I love living my life and I want to go out into the world and do things that make me happy, even if I know that, that some person might see my life not as worthy and then decide to end it. I didn't think today was going to hit me as hard as it did. Like, I did not. I don't know why. I did not think it was going to hit me as hard as it did. And I have been struggling in the most recent part of this conversation about like the talking about 2020 and George Floyd and the many other people who were murdered and the people we don't know about, because I think it's pretty. And I'm going on a bit of a sidebar here. I find it very difficult that someone had to lose their life for some of these conversations to happen in these spaces, for some people to get jobs or get commissions. Like, I've been really thinking about this because I did an interview for a piece that I did recently, and they're like, so like, why do you think that like it's important, or like, why do you think this story is being told now, or why do you think this is happening now? And I'm like, because a man was murdered. Like, and it makes me so sad. And so when I go back to fear, I think about that fear, but I also think about, the power in a life, and also the power of the absence of a life. And I think somebody asked a question about at times work feels like legacy work. and I think I do think about that. I think about like, when I die, like what will come of that? And it's like a big thought to have, and it's a lot of pressure. So I try not to like fully let that take over, for sure. But in order to like create a life and to create opportunities for others, I cannot let that fear rule me. And I need to let the joy be there as well. Because fear is dangerous. We've seen what fear can, dangerous, maybe that's the wrong word. In the wrong hands, it can be dangerous. I think fear is very powerful, and it can create change, and it can create that like immediate cascading change. Fear can mobilize people in the best way and also in the worst way. When you look at the faces of the people who've been out on the front lines, they are also there because of a fear that one day that person could be them. And then the people who are there, opposing the protests, are there because they fear that the world that they were cozy in is changing, and that they don't want that to be disrupted, the fear of change. And I do think we need to get better at living with and working through our fears. That's kind of a roundabout way to address that question, but it's where I'm at right now.
I don't think it's roundabout at all, and I think it's some true talk when it comes to, and you've been so generous in saying that I can certainly empathize. That I think a lot of what drives it's the question. It's the balance of legacy and impact that I feel is in constant negotiation, personal negotiation, which leads to art activism, art advocacy through using theater, or having art being the vessel in which I will communicate, right? But the fear of literally fear of dying, or the fear of occupying a space or a life or an energy, and then when that is no longer there, what is being left behind? And so I like is a genuine one for me. Other, I think, only child kind of thing. I have no siblings. I have no, like, so there's that part of it as well, which is like, I'm the end of my namesake. And then when you add the other intersections, I'm like, damn, like literally, like what does, when I think about family or generations, like what is going to be but it's been a huge mobilizing thing, at least for myself. I'll speak for myself in terms of my career, like why I do this or why we do this, or you know what I mean? So that's that, I suppose, using it for good. But you're right, there's got to be that balance there, Luke, like in terms of that thing that drives you can't occupy you, which sounds contradictory, but I think you articulated it so well. And I saw Makambe, you nodding your head to that. I wonder if you would like to offer a little bit of a reflection on what Luke was saying.
It was just it was a lot to take in. Thank you for sharing and articulating that. I'll just share the different things that I thought of as you were speaking. The first that I thought of is Katori Hall wrote a beautiful play called Mountaintop about Uncle Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And one of the lines in that play that, well, theater people, hi, how are you? So you know how sometimes you're seeing a play, right? And you're like, that's fine, that was a good play, whatever. And then other times you see a play and then there's like that one line or that one moment, and then like you literally never forget it. You never forget it. I saw that play several years ago now, and I'm like, never gonna be the same after this line. So that line for me from Mountaintop was when, how do I talk about this without spoiling it for the people who haven't seen it? But everybody knows that Dr. King was assassinated, and there's a moment where he talks about not being ready to go in the play, and he talks about being like, there was still so much to do. Like there's so many like different things on his to-do list that, as this character that Katori Hall had imagined, he was like, oh, like we're almost to like these particular things that we've been working, like we're almost there. And I thought to myself, like, whoa, like what if you were Martin Luther King and like you knew how important you were, but also you didn't know at the same time. Like, and the genuine vulnerability of being like, no, God, not yet. Like I haven't even gotten started. That line really humbles me because it makes me think about movements being movements, and that people's roles in movements is to propel the momentum forward. But like, yeah, I'm just thinking about the difference between movements and people and the ways in which those key figures, key events, inciting or instigating moments play a part in the overall momentum, which is a combination of several different things. So then I thought about, okay, so what if Martin Luther King was like, damn, if I had had my way, I still would have stuck around and done like way more things, but how much we were still left with as a global community because of that work and that desire to show up in service. And so I feel humbled by the thought of a hero being just like a man, being just like an uncle who just like really thought, who believed in what he believed in and was like, this is my life's work. I think about the humility of him identifying or somehow grappling with being a part of this thing that is bigger than him. So when I think of myself and all of us as like individual artists, I'm like, oh, Makambe, like I was thinking about legacy as well. I'm like, oh, like maybe it's not so much about what you, Makambe K, Simamba, can do, even though you're out here in these streets trying to do a lot, but it's like really about like, what can you add to the force that's already moving forward? And I'm just feeling in my body, like I feel the momentum in my body. I feel it quite a lot. And that's why I've started giving myself permission to have champagne moments, because I'm starting to learn that like, yes, Cyrus said it so beautifully, that the fire is still firing even when I'm not there, like necessarily like pouring gas on it. But it's so big. I'm just thinking about the thing that exists, that transcends all of us as individuals, but that we are all a part of as individuals, and feeling like what role, and just like thinking about what role art plays in that idea of momentum. Like I've seen a lot of like debates or commentary on social media, which like, I would love to hear your thoughts about this, Cyrus, but like, there's a lot of people who say, and sometimes I am people is me. People are like, stop just retweeting and saying thoughts and prayers. It's not doing anything. You're not doing anything. You're not, calling the MP and signing the petitions and marching the marches. Like, you're not doing anything. But then the other part of that argument, some people, I'm also people, is like, well, actually like that, like hashtagging and resharing is adding to momentum in a different way. I guess my question is like, do you have any like thoughts or ideas on like what the right way is to show up for a momentum that is revolution? Are there things that you have sort of like recognized in your study of systems changing that you're like, these things tend to work versus these things don't tend to work? Or is it just there's a magic to it and the energy just flows and the momentum picks up whenever it does?
So there's this concept in systems thinking, which is about sort of the idea that, in order to intervene in a system and plant a seed or an idea that revolutionizes or transforms the system, you need to already have a core groundswell of people who are going to support that idea and be able to carry it forward. So, the most successful revolutions, there's already kind of a core organizing group that is able to continue the work and to sort of move it forward. And you can look at lots of different examples of that. So, to some extent, social media, particularly in the movement for Black Lives, has been used to build a strong network and base that is a groundswell, so that when things happen, people can find out within sometimes 11 seconds of a shooting or of a police attack on protesters or of whatever, and respond and immediately sort of respond. So we're and it's reaching people and it's causing people to have conversations like the one that Tanisha described in the beginning of the call. Israel, like with the most unlikely of allies, potential allies. We're building a network. We're building this core group that is going to be able to sort of continue the work, right? And so that's one, is that when we try to intervene in the system, we do need to draw in a groundswell. So please keep making your social media memes, keep making your posts, keep sharing about the rally and the protest. Please also still go. Rallies and protests can happen from our beds. Rallies and protests can happen in a lot of different ways, and disabled people have taught us that, right? So we can, and as Tanisha mentioned earlier, activism isn't only just marching in the streets. It's all of these different things. We are creating a core group that is going to be able to carry the work forward and to sort of continue on in this moment. There was a question in the chat about how do you know that we're in a revolutionary moment? And I guess that kind of ties to what you're asking. How do you fuel and help support a revolutionary moment? Well, we know that our system is currently a system in chaos. And when you study systems theory, chaos isn't necessarily a bad word. It just means a destabilized, off-center force, which has the potential for dramatic change. Because if it's already rocking like this, well, what happens if you push the thumb? Well, what happens if you tip it this way? We can actually start to influence the system in chaos much more readily than we can influence a system that's in a steady state, that is in a static state, that is in a state that is immovable and in a state of conservation, where the roots are firmly in the ground and nothing's changing. We want to be on that edge of the forest fire where there's a little bit of chaos, because that is where the potential for change is happening. And the pandemic fueled us moving into a chaotic state. The fact that we're in a moment of late capitalism, and the capitalism is sort of again heaving a dying breath. It's taking a long time, but it is definitely, we saw in the first 2 months of the pandemic, they were putting $1 trillion a day into the stock market. That is unsustainable. How many more pandemics and how many more moments like that could sustain? Could capitalism sustain? So we're in a moment of late capital, and they've been saying we've been in a moment of late capital since 1999. It's not like they've just started saying it. We were in a moment where this system is starting to sort of change. So we're in this chaotic state. We're in a moment that is fecund. We're in a fertile moment where there is a potential to influence this system that is already starting to rock on its feet. And so we can be the levers that cause particular things to happen. And so you can pull a lever here and see a trickle down, or you can, push a button here and see an influence. And we're starting to see that now. And this is, we're seeing, yes, the lip service examples that we've talked about so far, that panel that's only in February, that one hire that gets happened in the institution, we're seeing those, but we're also seeing other things happening. We're seeing institutions that are hiring 12 Black people at a time to build a network and to build a system and to build a team. We're seeing Black innovators and leaders creating their own institutions and their own organizations from the groundswell up that is rooted in community and social justice. And they're doing incredible work, that is really transforming our social world. We're seeing all of this happening at the same time. And so anyways, I guess I'm here to say, this is back to me being ultimately fundamentally very hopeful. Because I study systems, I know that systems change. Octavia Butler told us that. She said that change was the only constant. She said that in the future, that all that you touch, you change. All that you change, changes you. Systems grow, expand, collapse, change. Grow, expand, collapse, change. We are in the collapse change moment. Martin Luther King was in a collapse change moment. We are in a moment where collapse and change is happening. And so much is possible. So this is where the brilliance of the artists come in, the visionaries, the dreamers. This is where all of the folks who are helping us to imagine that change, that possibility, write all the plays, sing all of the poems, do your spoken word, just start putting out there into the world what we want to see come, because that is actually shifting and shaping and changing the system, this living system that we are in. We are not only capitalism. We are not. This is a very recent regime on planet Earth. Human beings have existed on planet Earth in a variety of different ways that were much freer than our current iteration. And we know how to be together. We are fundamentally beings that like to be together. And we got this.
I have a question.
Sorry.
Okay.
Tanisha, do you want to respond? And then Makambe, you can ask that question.
Yeah, no, Cyrus, God, I could listen to Cyrus for like a week. So beautiful. And I just really leaned in when you talked about the places that are making the big changes and are hiring not the one person, but the 10 or the 12, because that is happening. And I really want to shout out those places where they are saying, we're gonna like shake the ground beneath us. Some people are gonna really not like it. People are gonna kick and scream, and people kick and scream because they're afraid, and not necessarily because they, you know, hate the Black people, but because they're fundamentally afraid of their position, of their legacies, of what is going to happen to the careers that they've built, and they get really freaked out. But I really, you know, I want to give a shout out to the program that I teach in at Sheridan College that last year hired 17 faculty members of color, which to me is absolutely, has been transformational for that student body in just an incredible, incredible way, right? And it was a decision to replace 4 teachers that had left, that between them had taught like 16 courses, with 17 new teachers, each teaching a course each, and getting those students acclimated to Indigenous teachers, Black teachers, Latino teachers, you know, Asian teachers, and not just the students of color benefiting from it, but all of the white students being like, I didn't realize how much I wasn't learning, and being so grateful for the ability to actually learn from more people. So absolutely yes to that. And Makambe, what you were saying about the activism that's kind of just limited to social media, you know, Cyrus is right. We can't underestimate the power of every little thing. When I think about 2 of the social movements in the last 15 years that have been the most impactful, they were born on Twitter. They were born from people reacting to George Zimmerman's acquittal with a simple hashtag Black Lives Matter. And that became a current that was unstoppable, right? And the other one was a bunch of women getting on Twitter and saying hashtag Me Too. And those things started a tidal wave. So I just don't want people to think, oh, all I can do is really post this meme, or I don't really know where else to go. That's a start. And if you do that, you know, wholeheartedly, it's not nothing. And I just want to say
Can I say one thing just to tag on to that? I'm a big sci-fi fan, as obviously I'm talking about Octavia Butler nonstop, but we have this idea inside, like, you know, when you watch sci-fi, that if you go back in time and you like move one branch, then like it changes the entire future, and suddenly we have flying cars and birds are president and like everything changes. So we all watch these shows and we're like, yeah, seems legit. That tracks. That's cool. I totally got that. But we don't believe that our individual actions, however small, are going to impact the future. Like, why is it that we don't believe? Like, if literally moving the leaf, you know, 300 million years ago makes it that dinosaurs stay alive, you know, in our future world, why don't we believe that that one message, you know, that might just reach that person on the exact day that they needed to hear it, you know, isn't going to be that, you know, they're the next, you know, person who's supposed to make magic happen in this world. So anyways, we believe a lot. We need to believe that we can make change.
Amen.
Makambe, did you want to ask that question there? And just before you do, sorry, just like, do you want to? And you can't yet. Just before you do. Folks, we're at the tail end. We're at the last sort of 25 minutes of this awesome discussion. And so if you have questions, they're already flowing, but if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A and we'll start addressing them. But I want to give my sister Makambe some space.
Hello, Space. How are you? Okay, while you were speaking, I just saw this question pop up that I think is a good segue that I would also like to answer. Nagwib says, have you as artists ever faced a situation where you had to change something in your work to fit in, almost to the point of being asked to censor material? And a follow-up is, if there's any pushback from the community when something creates a bit of discomfort, the challenge of the artist and the message. Yes, I have been in that scenario many times, but like, what's been really something I feel blessed to have experienced kind of earlier on was realizing that when I resist my work being changed in a way that doesn't feel right to me, my work has continued to take care of itself. I know that's not really maybe the easiest advice to follow, but like when I was working on Our Fathers, Sons, Lovers, and Little Brothers, I had experiences where folks who were not of the Black community and did not understand the material were giving me some wild dramaturgy that was changing the piece, that would have changed the piece in a way that I don't think it would have had the momentum and the trajectory that it's had today. I really, really believe that. So yes, I've had those experiences, but I'm feeling lucky, at least in my playwriting, to feel like I know what I'm going for. And so my intention is to say this, or my intention is to, for example, with Our Fathers, to create a piece where I feel like this famous, infamous Black boy is talking to his age mates. There's something about having like the intention of who exactly I was trying to speak to first and foremost in the work, like that actually allowed me to filter out the dramaturgy that was not serving me, and allowed me to like put ego aside and to let the things in that actually were like, okay, that piece of feedback, even though I don't like it, even though maybe I wanted to have, you know, I don't know, a dance sequence of the 1970s where there's disco balls. It's like, no, Makambe, but it's not actually serving the thing that you said that you were going to do. So that's just my offer in terms of like how I sort of discern feedback, so that I know that it's not me catching feelings. It's actually, what am I trying to do with the work, and is changing that, taking that out, altering that, affecting the work. Part of the reason that I've been able to cultivate that skill within myself and have that confidence is that like I have had like champions and aunties who have, before I was still figuring out, I'm like, how do you write? What is it? What are plays? What's possible in terms of theater? What's possible in terms of we can imagine, is that I've had, as much as I've had some folks who were not people I would work with again, I've also had a lot of champions. And I always shout out Catherine Hernandez, because she was one of my champs who was like, I trust you to write the thing that you want to write. And I'm like, me? Trusting me with my own idea? And then after you get it, you're like, duh, that's how it's supposed to be. So I'm really, when I think about the trajectory of Our Fathers and the specific artistic leaders who helped me be here. Hi, Mike, how are you? I think a lot about leadership, and I think a lot about a lot of the great leaders I know talk about their positions of leadership being those of service. And that's an idea that like makes a lot of sense in my brain, that resonates with me. But I do feel sometimes concerned about whether or not we in the community who are like not in like artistic leadership position, which we put up on pedestals for better or for worse. Like, my question is for all of you, because you are all artistic leaders. What are the things that the rest of us within the community can do to like show up and like take care of and nourish you? Because I feel like y'all are always like, you're always like advocating, protecting, especially like in artistic leadership, like having the conversations to make sure that, you know, the Black artist is connected. Like I've been very much protected in a lot of my processes, but who's taking care of you guys? And is there anything that we and like the rest of the community can also do to like make sure that you're getting that energy back? Because wait, I thought I was done, but I'm not. I like the idea that I'm the Black life that I'm also fighting for. So I also get to nap when I feel like it. But I also want like the leaders within our community to also feel nourished and taken care of. So that's where that question is coming from.
Thank you, Makambe. I'm actually gonna ask my colleague, Myekah, first. Yeah.
I don't even know how to answer
Aha.
the question. Really, I don't know. When we talk about, when I think about my position, I always say that it is to serve process. So to Makambe's point, I always look at it as serving others and not serving myself. And so I will say that I learned a lot in this panel this evening in conversation with all of you about how to honor oneself and one's practice. Champagne moments sound fantastic to me. Since I've never done that for myself ever. And I think sometimes it's hard to think about yourself when the whole time you really are trying to think about legacy and the road that you're paving and the doors that you're opening and the people you want to take care of and the people you want to uplift and how much you want to put forward. It's hard to wrap your mind around the idea of rest because there's so much to do. There's so many things to change. There's so many people to talk to. There's so many people to bring in. There's so many people to like put the spotlight on so people know that they're there. And I guess for me, if I'm gonna say for the community to know, is that when somebody emails me or calls me and asks me just to have a conversation, I will do my best to honor that. Please don't ever think that if somebody doesn't get back to you right away, that door is closed or that they don't want to help you. We want to help you so badly. Our capacity is just not as vast as the universe like we would like it to be. So when you are trying to enter those rooms, when you're trying to have those conversations, when you want to come and be a part of the magic that's happening, know that we want you to be there too. It just takes a little bit of time. And I think that's to Luke's point too, when we think about wanting to have that pause to allow for change, we can't allow that pause for ourselves because change is gonna come. Oh, and when we're thinking about lines of plays, Carolina changed just before the pandemic. Change is gonna come. It's gonna come fast, it can come slow, but change is gonna come. And something about that to me just speaks a lot to all of this, man. It does. But I wish that people knew that I need a pause and I need a break as much as everybody else. So even if we're not getting back to you as fast as we want, I'll get back to you. I mean, the person who got back to me a year later was Philip Aiken. And I'm so happy he did a year after I sent him an email. And I think that if we're looking at our mentors, if we're looking at our artistic directors, if we're looking at all these people in leadership, know that you are, even if you're sending those messages out into the void, that somebody is reading it, somebody is seeing it, somebody is hearing it. You exist and you matter and you're awesome. And we're going to find a way to bring you in. We're going to find a way to keep these doors open and pave these roads so that, you know, when you get out of theater school, it's not going to be some kind of crazy ass struggle to find your route, to find your road. I'm sorry, I swear. I know I was supposed to watch my language. But yeah, just, you know, I guess that's my 2 cents is just be kind to yourself, be kind to us. Know that there's love, that there's so much love. We've all hustled real hard to get where we are in hopes that the next generation doesn't have to hustle nearly as hard to get to this point. So just, you know, love yourself, slow down a little, have a champagne moment, read some Octavia Butler, because if you're not, you should. Yeah, I don't know if that answered anything. I get real rambly. Mike?
No, that was so resonant, and thank you, Myekah. And so I want to take Makambe's question and throw it over to Luke.
It's a great question, Makambe. Thank you for asking it. I think like asking the question in itself is a part of the answer to that question. Yeah, because you know, like you see people and they're like, "Hey, you good?" and "You must be tired," and like I find like some of the conversations I have with folks in the industry who think that they're checking in are actually just like reminding me of all of the things going on and of how tired I am and about all the, "Oh, you must be so busy. You got this and there's this and there's this." And it's like, oh yeah. Like, you know, and I think that, you know, the intention sometimes from those conversations is they want to check in. Like people who have also been checking in with me about like my injury recovery. It is actually like, it's draining talking about it. Like sometimes I'd actually just rather not, to be honest. So like by you asking the question to like what are the things that are useful, like not assuming that like this conversation is a conversation we want to have, but actually asking what that is, like that, like knowing that you're asking the question already makes me feel supported. Because I know that whenever I figure out what that thing is, that if it's more, that's more specific perhaps, and I can go to you and say, hey, remember when you asked what the thing was? I think it's actually this, because I think it changes. I think sometimes what helps me is knowing that you are taking care of yourself, so that like I don't have to worry about you right now. If that makes sense, you know, like knowing that, okay, like Makambe is doing, like, she's got her champagne moments, so I can focus some energy over here, because I know that like at least she's holding herself down. I know there's some other artists who maybe aren't right now, and I can provide some support from them. Like, it helps to know that everyone's doing their part, everyone's taking care of themselves too. Maybe that feels like too much like a parent thing. Like I think of, but also like, yeah, like Katie takes care of me, my partner. I'm gonna give her a shout out. So sometimes like taking care of the people who take care of me helps take care of me. Like when Katie was the primary caretaker and I wasn't able to walk, I was getting people to like bring her flowers and like give her support, because she's supporting me, but I'm not in a position where I could support her. So by support, like, I think there's so many different ways around it, but just like knowing that people care and that people are taking care of themselves and the people around them gives some relief, because then I don't feel like I have to do it all. And that's just, you know, from this my perspective or my experience.
Sorry, Tanisha.
I love these responses because I so get it. I think, you know, Makambe asked, what can people do for us? Remember that we're human, and that's it. Because sometimes I think that there's this belief that we can operate at some kind of machine-like capacity, or that we can do things that you suddenly get bestowed with a title, and that makes you fundamentally different person than the person you were before, which is not in any way true. And that also that people still see us as artists and part of the group, because the elevation can be very lonely and isolating. And I remember one of the most painful moments that I've had in this job was the day that someone that I was very friendly with, who I considered a colleague, kind of stopped referring to me as an artist and a pal, and started referring to me in almost every conversation as a gatekeeper. And it was like really jarring. And I just was like, I understand that to a certain degree, yes, I have the ability to give some people opportunities, but it's like nothing about the person I was the day before I was hired is different now. Like, and so that's what I want people to remember. And as Myekah said, we really want to use these positions and whatever resources that we have. And my company my resources are tiny, and some people's resources are huge. But whatever the resources are, we actually want to use them to help you. We don't want to like hold them for ourselves. That's not what the job's about. And so we will make every attempt that we can to be there for people. And while I can't program everybody's play or put everybody in a show, I can listen. I respond to as many emails as I can. I, like Luke, sometimes I'll just think about someone and I'll just send them a messenger note while I'm on Facebook. How you doing? Just to let them know that in that sea of artists, like I remember you and I just want to know that you're okay. But please don't elevate leaders to some bizarre status, because especially during COVID, what I've seen, to be really frank, is that a lot of ADs were just like scared people trying to make it through. That's it. Trying to save companies, trying to not lay people off, trying to still have some kind of a role in society, you know, and that's, yeah, we're just people.
Mm. Cyrus, I want to ask you just Makambe, it's a stunning question, and I will sort of close off this because Cyrus, I want you to close off with another question, okay? With the last question of the night. And I will echo so much of what has already been said, and but I feel like I have to underline the the idea of that that Tanisha brought forward, which was it can be very isolating. It is very, and it is very isolating. The certain parts of this position are incredibly gratifying. And I say position because of the opportunity and the resources that one can be afforded to do, to offer, to be of service, like Myekah pointed out. And that is quite, in my mind, that is quite meaningful. And that is certainly a lot of the responsibility or job of the job itself. I mean, other ADs might disagree, but that's at least my vantage point. But because of that isolation, we absolutely forget about that need for human connection from a non-occupational realm. And so what I would say is that if you are if one is trying to make a connection, that trust that connection is taken as exactly that I'm also going, oh yeah, sweet, somebody wants to make a connection, but it can be really, really hard when that is solely about the opportunity, as opposed to the connection being like, oh, you're really cool, you're really dope, whatever, all of those things, where I'm like, oh, can we be friends? In my mind, I'm like, let's be friends. And they're like, no. And that's really harsh. That's really cold, you know what I mean? So anyway, there's nothing, I don't know what analogy that I'm going to bring forward, but you can lead whatever, you know, kingdom, whatever castle, whatever country, whatever state, you know, you want, but if you don't have the people in the community to actually authentically and genuinely support that leadership, then it just becomes, you know, a tower sort of position, and that's just it's no fun. It's just not fun. It's not fun, right? It's just not. And it has to be
the genuineness of the relationships and the offerings too, right? Like
absolutely.
What you say. And that's really hard. I remember one day on Facebook, I'm sorry I jumped in there, Mike, but
no, it
just really stirred something. I remember one day I had been, I was on Facebook and I went and I looked at, once in a while I'll just look at like friend requests, and there were like 164. And I had never had more than maybe 5 at a time before that. And I thought, what is this like? What is this about? This is not about me. This is about my job, because I was no cooler but after. But suddenly everybody wants to be your friend. Everybody wants to be in your sphere. And I understand as an artist that you want to make inroads. Like, I completely get it. But it does, I hate being in a place where you have to question sincerity. And it definitely does sometimes put you in that place.
Thank you, Tanisha. And Makambe, thank you for that question as well, because I think it's like an ongoing thing as it relates to like, how can we have those champagne moments? So it's like it's that continued negotiation, at least on my end. But Cyrus, okay, it's a big one, but as you've got 5 minutes together, really 4 minutes, all right? But I feel like you'll be able to close us off with this big question from Charles, all right? And which is, how can artists, academics, and activists come together to dream about a better future in a social climate that seeks to trivialize BIPOC collective action? So there's several parts to this. You might disagree with that assumption already. How does public effect and collective knowledge production, production be mobilized to reach those outside the theater community? And is there a way to penetrate into communities with lesser access to theater? Let's say theater or art form, visual arts, let's say arts access.
Yeah, I mean, we're in a moment right now where it is the artists, it is the scholars, it is the dreamers, it is the activists who are, you know, suggesting, putting forth provocations and suggestions. They're putting forth sometimes very detailed roadmaps, but sometimes ideas that are just the right kind of radical, the right kind of destabilizing, that they're influencing the system in a particular way. And yes, you know, when a system is trying to maintain its steady state and not change, and in Canada, Northern Turtle Island, the steady state is white supremacy, the steady state is a colonial process, the steady state is producing the same plays by the same 5 dead white men forever and ever and ever, and no one else getting a chance. Like the steady state wants to maintain itself. And so discrediting or trivializing the incredible work that is coming from the groundswell is but one tactic to try to discourage us from keeping going, right? And so I think a lot about what Assata Shakur told us. She said that we have to believe that we will win. You know, we have to believe. And then she said that if we don't believe that, then we're whipped before we start. We have to look at what dangers exist. So be realistic, which just goes back to what I was saying in the beginning, 60 seconds of presence, being very aware of what dangers exist. And we have to look at those dangers coolly and carefully. And we have to, you know, and we have to move forward and make decisions based on an accurate analysis of the field that we're in, right? So she suggested that. So, you know, it doesn't mean that the assaults from the right and from all over that are going to try to say that what we're doing isn't making change or isn't valuable, or that what we're doing is just armchair activism, or what we're doing. It doesn't matter that they're saying that. We are a groundswell of organizing that is actually shifting and changing the field. And it is artists. It is artists with what I would call dangerous ideas, you know, ideas that are so dangerous that we used to only whisper them, you know, ideas about our great-grandchildren being born free. You know, these are messages that were spread. You know, these are the dangerous ideas that these artists are putting out there, you know, and this incredible proliferation of this creative renaissance that we find ourselves in, because we're in a revolutionary moment, but we're also in a Black Renaissance, right? So we're in this moment where there's all of this exciting possibility happening. And what I love about it is that it is not only happening in a black box theater. It is not only happening in the big theater house. It is happening on the street corner. It's happening at parties. It's happening in people's living rooms. You know, COVID made it that it's happening in the most unlikely of places. You could go to a play sitting in your bathtub watching a bath. Like you can, like theater is now everywhere. And so these conversations actually are taking place in the zeitgeist in such a broad and beautiful way. And what I've loved about being an activist for as long as I've been an artist is, you know, looking at the ways that these dangerous ideas get produced through creative methods and disseminated, again, in the most unlikely of places. On the bus to the rally, we're doing some theater of the oppressed at the front, and, you know, people are singing, and, you know, amazing things are possible. So we are in a moment right now where I think we need to keep supporting artists to have their dangerous, beautiful creations, and support those to be produced, to be shown, to be exhibited for free, and, you know, in the most accessible way possible. You know, sometimes that may mean being in a theater, but a lot of times that may mean being in a park or in a coffee house or in a cafe, or like wherever, where people actually, where humans are gathering, right? So, I mean, Charles, this is a huge question. I hope I've done it justice, and I know we're close to time, but I will say that these ideas are permeating through the system, and we need to keep going with these dangerous ideas.
Beautiful, Cyrus. Thank you. I want to offer one last thing just for our panelists, as well as Myekah and myself, just to offer, if you will, one word, one brief thought as either a takeaway for you from this or something that you're leaving with before we say goodbye for now. And so I'm happy to sort of launch that. I love the sort of quote from you, Cyrus, of we are in a fertile moment and we can be believers. That is absolutely what I'm going to take. And so thank you. I'm going to pass it on to Luke.
I can't touch fire. I can't do it, and that's okay. Thank you. I was on a roller coaster tonight through this, and that was great, and I needed all of it. Thanks, everyone.
Would you like
I pass it. Yes. I'm going to pass it to Myekah.
I think the word I'll walk away with is renewed. Yeah, I am very grateful to have shared space with all of you tonight. I've never felt so inspired by the things that you have all said. I am quite moved, so I'm going to pass it to Tanisha.
Sorry, I was muted. I can't take away one thing. This whole thing has been like absolutely incredible. I think I'm gonna take away a sense of comfort in how much amazing Black love and power and ferocity there is. Because there's 6 of us here, and we could have easily invited another 24 people, 3 people, 4 people. And I know that on the days when I can only touch the cool embers, that someone else is in the fire voluntarily doing what they do. And then when they need rest, I can jump in for them. That's a really beautiful thing to know. And it makes me feel, it just makes me feel a lot less jaded. And I'm going to pass to Makambe.
Wow, family, you're just moisturizing my soul. This is like shea butter for my spirit. The thing that I'm going to take away out of many things is we are human. Yeah.
Cyrus?
I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, from my intestines, from my feet, that I am so thankful to be, with all of your brilliance tonight. This was, I think, shea butter for the soul is exactly it. This was the salve that was so needed, right? Because of course the reality is that, when you're standing in topsoil or humus, when you're standing in humus, it's like you're standing in compost. It doesn't always feel good. But then you kind of lift your head up and realize that you're standing with all of these siblings, and we're in it together. And so I just feel so thankful for your wise gifts this evening, and I'm going to carry them with me as I go about my journey. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Myekah. Thank you, Cyrus. Thank you, Luke. Thank you, Tanisha. Thank you, Makambe. And thank you all who joined with us this evening. Oh, this convo, I feel like I don't want to actually stop, but we will, just the same. But also just want to take a moment to give a real shout out to our Tarragon folks, especially Heather Kaplap, who teched and helped coordinate this event. Thank you so much. And, you know, of course, let's keep this going. Please reach out. Please check those links that have been dropped in. Check out Our Fathers, Sons, Lovers, and Little Brothers, of course, in March with our dear friend Makambe. Check out Cahoots, check out Wild Seed, check out Soulpepper. Do all of those things. All right. Have a good night, everybody. Thank you so much. Take care.